And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll. It's that guy. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we're back, and we are going to continue with our positional breakdown from the offseason. And we're, like I said yesterday, we're ping-ponging back and forth. So we went quarterback, defensive line, and we're back on the offense. And we're going to talk wide receiver. And Brian, this position is one of many questions, one of many issues, and they have a new coach as well. So a lot to talk about here with the wide receiving core moving into 2022.
Yeah, there is. I mean, you talk about a new coach. You talk about two of your veterans are coming off torn knees. You're talking about Braden Lindsey, is he going to finally be the guy? We've been waiting on him to repeat that 2019 season, which he hasn't done. Is it because of how he's used? Is it because of him? I mean, you look at, okay, there's some talented young players. Are they going to step up? And then you talk about it. If all those things go well, right now they still only have 8 scholarship receivers because they just added Matt Salerno as a scholarship receiver. He was already part of the equation.
Sure.
There's question marks. I mean, there's question marks about who's going to be the guy. There's question marks about because look, the alpha is Michael Mayer, just like it was last year. But who's that guy at wide receiver, right? Sure. Who's that guy that's going to step up, or guys who are going to step up in big games? When they're playing Ohio State, who are the guys that are going to step up and make big plays against Clemson, against BYU? We don't know the answers to that. And, there's talent and all those type of things, but eventually it's kind of like it's like what we talked about the other day with quarterbacks. We've had a theory on why the receivers haven't been as good as we think they should be. It was coaching. Okay, was that all on Dell? It's part of that on Tommy Rees. Was part of that on Brian Kelly. We're going to find out the answers to that, right? And that's kind of what makes this a unique and intriguing offseason for Notre Dame is you've hired a new coach who's been a position coach really for 1 year. You think he's got the talent to get you over the hump. We'll find out if he does or doesn't. We're not going to necessarily comment on that today. I'm about halfway through watching the film of Baylor, and I like some of the technical things that I've seen. But then it's like, okay, well, how much of an impact is he going to be able to make in his first year? He should be able to make a big impact.
Agreed.
I mean, I think a good receivers coach can absolutely make a big impact. But how much of one? And what's the system going to look like? I mean, there's just so many question marks about this position group, which is why it's hard for me to get too excited about it because there are so many question marks. I mean, just looking at spring practice, who's going to be healthy in spring practice? You're going to have Lindsey. You're going to have the 2 freshmen. You're going to have
Salerno,
and Jaden Thomas.
5.
That's it for the spring because Avery Davis is going to be out there in the spring.
No.
I'd be a little surprised if Joe Wilkins is out there, although he got hurt at the beginning of October, which, if spring is late enough, maybe he gets out there for some stuff, but he's not going to be 100%. Tobias Merriweather's not an early enrollee.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you're going to have more tight ends on your roster than wide receivers
of
right now.
Yeah, you're right.
The transfer portal is unlikely to really have an impact for Notre Dame. We've already seen Justice Lowe couldn't get into school. He's going to Oregon.
Oh, is that what happened? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And it's part of what happened.
Okay, fair enough.
But, some of the guys that people talking about, Caleb Douglas, I mean, he's a nice player, but he's not going to help Notre Dame in 2022. You look at the grads, Chase Cota is a guy that people mentioned from UCLA, guy that Notre Dame recruited coming out of high school, nice player. He's a grad transfer from UCLA. Well, that's more up their alley of a guy that they can get. But even then, it's kind of like, Chase Cota had 18 catches for 286 yards last year. The year before that, he had 11. The year before that, he had 25 for 350. The year before that, he had 13 for 168. So you could ask yourself, okay, in a more pass-oriented offense, could Chase Cota be a bigger player? I would say, yeah, I think so. I'd look at him. But is Chase Cota all of a sudden like, wow, you got Chase Cota, you're going to beat Ohio State now? I don't know if that's that guy. Those guys that we're going to talk about as far as that come between now and next September, the guys that are going to really be the drivers behind you beating Ohio State and Clemson are the guys on your roster.
Absolutely.
Or meaning, like, if you're going to beat Ohio State or Clemson, it's going to mainly be because of the guys that are currently on your roster.
No question.
And that's where it's going to be, that's where it's going to be important for Chancey Stuckey to kind of hit the ground running. And if he can't, then, we're going to see kind of a repeat of, a slightly improved version of last year's receivers, which is going to be fine against 9 of the 12 teams on the schedule, 8 of the 12 teams on the schedule, but not so much against Ohio State, Clemson, USC, and, maybe BYU.
Would you
say that's where we get down to?
Would you say that the difference in coaching will be the most obvious of all the new coaches, will be the most obvious at wide receiver potentially? I mean, based on where they were.
Line.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because here's another concern I have. I don't know if Tommy Rees is necessarily a guy that cares a ton about fundamentals. And my big concern is he didn't seem to have a problem with the job Del Alexander was doing.
That's true.
From what
it sounds like he was the driving force to keep him around for a while.
Correct.
I mean, for as long as he did.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Like, so my thing is, I know that Tommy Rees has been given a lot of, authority by Marcus Freeman to make the hire. He's the one driving the running back hire, which is why you're probably going to get someone with an NFL background as your running backs coach. So you look at it and say, okay, most NFL coaches don't care as much about technique. It's all scheme. Well, if Tommy Rees wants to be a successful college football coach,
right,
he's going to have to understand that's kind of important. And that's something where Marcus Freeman, as much as he is giving Tommy Rees and the offensive staff sort of some autonomy, he's going to have to step into this and say, look, this has got to be a more important piece to what you're doing. And that's it. I mean, you don't need to tell them what they need to do scheme-wise, because I don't really think he cares, nor should he. It's about get the job done, right? That's what a defensive coach, head coach should be saying to the offense. Look, I don't care how you do it, but get the dang job done, right? And so to me, that's something that I'm curious about. Is that going to be a point of emphasis for Chancey Stuckey as he goes into this? Because if he's not being told, go improve the technique, like, I had an interesting conversation with somebody recently. It's very close to the offensive situation. And according to him, nobody on offense really thought that the problem with Del Alexander was his coaching. It was his recruiting that got him axed. Well, if nobody recognizes that they can't get off a freaking press against any cornerback with a pulse, then it's not going to change. So that's kind of something that I've learned a little bit over the last couple weeks, which has kind of got me concerned about the receiver play. Now, that's where Marcus Freeman's got to step up and say, hey, fellas, I'm not saying your guys got to look like Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, but you guys got to know how to play the game. And, that's going to help us on defense, because we think we're really good at press until we play other teams.
Right, because of what they do to the wide receivers at Notre Dame.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's going to be, to me, the biggest question mark is, Chancey Stuckey was the leading receiver at Clemson for multiple years, played under Dabo Swinney, and he played in the NFL for like 5 years. I know he knows how to run routes.
Right.
I know that at Baylor, fundamentals is a big part of kind of what they do.
Sure.
They don't have a real complex scheme. I watched the Baylor-Oklahoma State game, and I watched Baylor run the same play about 9 times, pass play 9 times in the first half. The only adjustment was the backside one-on-one route would alter based on the coverage. They would just give him a check to tell him slant, hitch, out, whatever. And same front side trips concept over and over again. I mean, just that's not, hey, let's show how smart we are. That's, hey, let's teach our kids how to play and put them in position to be successful.
Sure.
So does he bring that with him to Notre Dame? Or is he going to kind of come here and be like, hey, look, we don't care about all that. Just here's what we're doing schematically. You need to make sure you guys know how to do it. And that's going to be a question mark. So that's something that I'm curious to see about in the spring, Vince. And hopefully we'll have access to spring practices and be able to see all that stuff. But
It almost feels like it almost would be based on everything that you just said. I'm trying to take it all and bring. It sounds like they would almost accidentally be better at fundamentals because he is a good fundamentals coach, but that may not be what they were looking for in the first place. It's like they're going to back into being good at fundamentals potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say that they didn't care about it. I just don't think they recognize it as being as big of an issue. Meaning, of course, they want him to coach technique. It's just more of, are they going to make it a priority? Like, I know that Del Alexander thinks he taught them good technique. I know he thinks that.
Right.
I know that for a fact that he thinks
I know
that.
you do. Yeah.
And so, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? So it's kind of like, if you don't recognize that something is a problem, then you're not going to take steps to address it.
No,
they
true.
recognize that recruiting was a problem.
Well, that's one.
Right?
I mean, that's one box. I guess that's good.
Right.
Because it was.
Right.
No question.
Now, what we don't know is, and somebody just made this comment in the chat, and we'll pull up the super chats here in a second, but Johnny S. said, maybe if the wide receiver coach has any pride, maybe he will teach technique in spite of Tommy Rees. I mean, there's an opportunity for that.
There's part of that.
Right?
Yeah,
if a receiver's coach really cares about technique, then yeah, he's gonna. I mean, I've done that before, where my head coach who was also offensive coordinator, didn't care as much about that, and he just wanted to make sure they know where they're going. I said, oh, okay, they'll make sure they'll know where they need to go, but I'm gonna on my own make sure that I teach them how to get there the right way.
Right,
and that's the problem with a lot of coaches who put so much emphasis on scheme, is they don't care as much about how to get somewhere. It's what to do. It's where you need to get to. You've got to know the scheme. You've got to know the scheme. Well, the great teams, Ohio State, Alabama, they have great schemes, especially in previous years for Alabama. Not so much this year, but it wasn't terrible. Just wasn't as good as it was. But there's a great emphasis on how to get there.
Sure.
And that's what Notre Dame has been lacking. And that's what gets them in trouble against the better teams on the schedule. That's what hurt them in the second half of the Oklahoma State game, because Oklahoma State schematically took away what Notre Dame was doing in the first half, and it required them to make adjustments. Well, those adjustments required you to be a more fundamentally sound offense, and you couldn't do it. And so if Tommy Rees doesn't recognize that, and John McNulty, his right-hand man, doesn't recognize that, then I don't know how much they're going to demand that from Chancey Stuckey, who, again, has been a receivers coach for 1 year. So he needs to be learning from them in regards to how to put a practice plan together and what's the point of emphasis and things like that. So that's a big question that we're gonna kind of find out about this football team moving forward. Did Tommy Rees really learn that lesson from last year? Did he learn the lesson of, the scheme is great, but if you can't coach him up on how to get there, it doesn't matter where you're sending them. And if he learned that lesson, then I think at the end of the day, this is still going to be a really good receiving core. If he didn't learn that lesson, then we're going to have some problems. So that's kind of that unknown aspect of what we're talking about here, because there is a change of the position. And to me, I would argue that that's as big of an issue for me as who's going to fill out the depth chart. The rest of this conversation is going to be about who's going to fill out the depth chart. But I did want to address that right away, which is it may not be about Chancey Stuckey. It's got to be about Tommy Rees. On the flip side of everything I just said, if Tommy Rees does recognize those deficiencies from the offense this year and make sure that he addresses them with how they plan their offensive practices on a daily basis, especially during the spring and summer, then we will see a big jump, and that will have a big impact. So I spent a lot of time on the negative aspect of it, but the flip side is that if he does recognize this and does take steps to address it, and demands that Chancey Stuckey focus on those things, hey, here's the finer points, or trust Chancey Stuckey to know what's important and say, hey, look, this is the scheme we run. It's your job to make sure these guys know how to execute the scheme with great technique. I may not know what it is. I'm 29 years old. I've only ever coached quarterbacks. I may not know those finer points. I'm trusting you to make sure you get them there. Even if that's all Tommy Rees does to him, I don't think Tommy Rees needs to tell Chancey Stuckey, here's how you got to coach these receivers up. It's here's the scheme we're doing. Here's we'd had problems with spacing last year. We had problems with get off last year. Our guys just got rerouted. Maybe, whatever the case may be, our timing and our ability to get off the line were problems. Fix it. And then it's up to Chancey Stuckey to pop in the film and say, okay, here's how I'm going to fix it.
And I think
if they at least do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
if you at least do that, you'll be fine.
Absolutely. Because I do believe that the position coach is responsible for fundamentals. Now, Tommy Rees is responsible for hiring somebody that's good at fundamentals, right? But, it's kind of a charge that, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. That's why we hired you. That's why we brought you in. Mm-hmm. And in order for my scheme to work, we have to be better at this.
We just have to be fundamentally sound.
Right.
I mean, that's it. That's all he needs to say. Even if he doesn't know what and Tom Rees is a smart guy. I know he knows some of it. And it's like when I was a pass game coordinator, I knew the protections we had to do. It doesn't mean I could necessarily go coach the offensive line, but I knew what we needed to do. I could instruct, hey, listen, this is what we have to do. We have to get better at this mic protection to the field, right? We just got to get better at this. How do you do that? That's why we pay you, right? That's why, Right. And so that's the thing is like, look, I know we're not good at this. I may not know the ways to fix it, but I can at least instruct the receivers coach to fix it.
Right. Right.
And that's the key. And then now it becomes about Chancey Stuckey and what he's going to do. So it's really a simple conversation, man. Hey, listen, I need these kids to have impeccable technique by the time we get to August. It's as simple as that. I need, because then when you get to August, you can focus on getting Tobias Merriweather up to speed fundamentally, but the focus can then be more on the scheme. And that's how you build a roster, right? Like that's how you build it. Like if you don't start focusing on fundamentals till August, you're in trouble. August is kind of that putting the finer points on it and then really diving into how it correlates to what you're doing schematically.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the finishing touches of it. This is all starting to get implemented now. It's got to start getting implemented now. You've got to be watching film with these kids. If I'm Chancey Stuckey, I'm popping in film of other receivers that do it the right way. I'm popping in the Bama film. I'm popping in the Ohio State film, and I'm showing, hey, look, this is how you play. And this is what we're going to do. And these are the expectations. These are the drills you can be doing on your own right now to be working on this, right? Since I can't work with you. And then that way, when you get to spring practice in March, you can then focus on more of those things. And it's all about, the spring has got to be about fundamentals.
Not about scheme.
One of the problems of the Brian Kelly tenure is that I felt like in the spring, too often it's like we would be at practice and it's like they were really trying to focus on schematic things that can beat the defense. I don't care about that. I really don't. I want to focus on how to play that. Then the success will be a byproduct of that. And then the summer is about then building on that foundation you laid in the winter and spring. And so you've got 8 months to get this thing going. And they can make a lot of adjustments, a lot of changes to stance and start, to their stem, to how they use their hands, to how they get in and out of their cuts, to how they attack the football. I mean, that above all else, you got to at least get better at that, right? And so there's a lot that needs to get fixed. But the reality is there's a lot of optimism that it can be fixed if you focus on it. And that's the whole point of this rant that I'm going on is it's not to say it's not going to happen or Tommy Rees doesn't know what he's doing. It's none of that. It's here's been the problem. They have to recognize it's a problem, and then they got to fix the problem. Will they do those things? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not in those meetings. All I can say is it needs to happen. And so this wasn't it's not going to happen. It's I don't know if it's going to happen.
Right.
It needs to happen because at the end of the day, if it doesn't happen, the Notre Dame receivers are talented. They're not so talented that they can just go out athlete guys at Ohio State or Clemson or USC or, well, USC to a degree on defense, you still can. Georgia, Bama, right? You're not going to out-talent those teams for 60 minutes. You don't have and a perfect example is Ohio State when Clemson in 19 had Justin Ross and T. Higgins, and those guys weren't doing a good job with their technique, and they were just getting beat up physically by the Ohio State corners, and they couldn't do anything on offense in the first half. Right. It wasn't until Trevor Lawrence started just running that Clemson got back in that game. And then that kind of opened up some plays, but they were getting their butts kicked. Even T. Higgins and Justin Ross. Notre Dame doesn't have T. Higgins and Justin Ross on this team. I mean, they might, but those guys are freshmen and sophomores right now.
Right, exactly.
And we haven't seen them do a whole lot yet, right? And I'm referring to Dion and Tobias. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. Is that's going to be the key more than anything. That's going to be the key, and that's why I wanted to address at the beginning. Is that's going to be more important than anything that we talk about from an individual player standpoint. Is if Chancey Stuckey's task is to make sure this is the most sound group of receivers that the country has, then your scheme is going to work. That's the thing that pisses me off so much about these college coaches that are so obsessed with scheme. And it's guys like that. To me, it's guys that want to be in the NFL.
Sure.
And I think Tommy Rees wants to be an NFL coach. And it's these air raid guys that want to prove everyone how smart they are. Not all of them, some of them. But like those are the guys where you tend to see that we don't care about technique thing as much because it's about the scheme. It's like if you taught your kids how to play, your scheme would be so much more effective.
Absolutely.
And that's what Bama figured out offensively. Well, it's not that they figured it out. Nick Saban's always been you got to be good at fundamentals. But then as his offense became more explosive, he wasn't willing to sacrifice the fundamental aspect for that. So it kind of forced Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian to say, hey, look, we need to know how to play. We need to go hire position coaches that can teach these kids how to play. That's why he hired Holman Wiggins, who did a great job at Virginia Tech teaching those kids how to play. That's why he hired Kyle Flood to coach the offensive line for a number of years, because he was a really good technical offensive line coach. And what happens when those guys are together? They go out and have dynamic offenses the last few years. Tommy Rees has to understand, yeah, I want to have NFL schemes. I want to show everyone how smart I am. Cool. All right, fine.
That's cool. Yeah.
But understand the importance at the collegiate level that playing the game the right way is to you accomplishing that show everyone how smart you are mindset, right? Because if they know how to play and they know how to do the little things well, if your schemes are as good as you think they are, and as good as you and I think that they are, because we do think that Tommy Rees is a smart coach, man, you're going to – and plus the talent that they do have, which is very good. It's not elite like it is at Ohio State or Bama, or at least it's been at Bama. I don't know if it's going to be that moving forward. I don't love their receiving core as much moving forward. They had that one great 2017 – was it 2017 class? Or 2018, whatever the class that Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs,
right,
and it was Devontae Smith, and then I believe Jalen Waddle came along the next year. Yeah, that 2-year stretch where they just all those studs that they've had kind of were in that class, and so that's my thing. That's kind of my rant. So rant over. They have to fix this, because the reason part I want to address this, because that's ultimately what held Notre Dame back. I've heard so many people say, oh, they don't have this, they don't have that. And every year they're surprised at how fast the Notre Dame receivers run at the combine. I can't believe my boy can that fast. Well, we weren't, because we watched the film of him run smoking DBs and the ball not getting thrown to him, right?
Exactly.
Or, same thing with Chase Claypool. It's like, teach these kids how to play. I'll never forget Chase Claypool coming back last year after a freaking mini camp. Talking about, man, if I could run routes like this in college, we would have. And I'm like, dude, you've been at a mini camp in the NFL,
exactly.
Right? Like, you, that's embarrassing. And that was always the problem. They didn't know how to play. They just got by on talent. So I've always felt the talent is, with the exception of 2017, the talent's always been better than the production as a unit. It's about, do you know how to use them correctly? And that's kind of where we're gonna find out if that changes. Because if that changes, I'm going to get real excited about this receiving core.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair, because there's talent there.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that talent, Brian. And it's funny. You said,
can we? No, I want to bring up this question because this drives me nuts.
Okay.
Can you bring up this? And I want to get the other super chats in here really quick before we move on.
The super chat, is that which one you're referring to?
Yeah, the most recent super chat, and then there was 2 others that were from the same person earlier that I want to bring up.
Gotcha. Okay, so from Ed, thank you very much for the super chat. If a position coach doesn't teach fundamentals and techniques, what the heck does he do? Make sure his guys get on the bus on time?
Notre Dame practices fundamentals under Del Alexander. It's not that they don't do it. It's about teaching the right type of fundamentals. Are you focusing on the right things? Their focus so much was on the top end of a route.
Yes, they did that a lot. And as an
all
example,
they focused on was top.
As an example, he loved that shoot that you make out of like PVC pipe.
Right.
And I made one as a high school wide receivers coach. I had one, but we didn't do it every day, and we didn't do it every.
And they did
drill.
the same thing. I literally watched them do the same thing every single day. The reason for there are some drills that I did every day. You know, stance and starts. I told my guys, we're going to start every single practice. Going to start with stance and starts. Every single one. Now we would incorporate different things into the stance and starts. Sure. The problem, however, is that like you got to practice all the other things. We would practice with the receivers, and I would always pick the special teams day where we didn't have any receivers on special teams. And it would a lot of times that would be on kick return.
Okay.
And so when we do kick return day, I'd take the receivers down to we had that big pole vaulting mat.
Yeah. The
right?
Pit. It's a pit. Yeah.
And that's where we would work on laying out for balls. Right. I don't want my guys laying out and landing on our hard practice field on a Tuesday afternoon. Right. So you practice on that.
And you make a game out of it. You make it fun.
Right. And then later on we would have a drill where we would have guys on their knee and I throw the ball about an inch off the ground and they've got to get their hands under it and turn. And you've seen people do that on tough catches in the NFL and in college. You see guys kind of catch and kind of turn when they can. Now, if you're just catching it off the ground, that you can't turn that. But you'll even see them, they'll kind of catch it off the ground and try to pull it up here. You got to practice.
That's a practice skill. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so we would practice one-on-ones. We would practice one-handed catches. You know, and like it was like, hey, look, I don't want this to be a thing that you do. Like I would get pissed at my receivers if they were out there with nobody on them and just trying to catch it one-on-one. No. There's a time and a place for that. When you're wide open, that's not the time for that.
Right.
We will practice that. Never saw them really once every year you'd see them do it like a practice, right? And I've talked to because a lot of people say, well, you're not at every practice. Trust me, I've had enough conversations with people that are at every single practice to understand that this is what they do every single practice. And the odds of them doing the same drills only when we're there, like that's like a deep thought of, I mean, that's like a conspiracy theory that just makes no sense. Like they're not going to only, hey, when the media's here, we only practice this.
Yeah.
Because it's only the receivers that would do the same thing every single time we saw them the last 5 years. And it was just all top ends.
About getting low and getting in your and that's what that thing is for, that PVC pipe.
Right.
Thing. Yeah.
And so it's about teaching the entire repertoire. I mean, we would have days. And I mean, I watch these receiver coaches now, and I'm so jealous because they got these big pads for their forearms.
Yeah, those
I didn't have those.
Yeah.
Nope. I just would go home with bruises all over my arm. But I mean, it's doing those things. It's putting them in stressful technical situations and then teaching them how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And those are the things you've got to have a plan for that. Like on Tuesday, we focus on this. On Wednesday, and it's got to build towards playing on Saturday.
Sure.
Right. And there's other times like where those things got to really be a point of emphasis in the spring and summer and early fall camp. So that way, when you get to the season, it's just making sure that you're staying on top of your craft.
Right.
Because those things can't be implemented during the season. You're either going to the season with it or you're not, because that's when the scheme becomes such an important part of what you're doing. And you've got so there's a time and a place where scheme has to be priority number one. And your individual periods are meant to be, hey, let's stay on top of, let's stay sharp with these things, right? So not a week goes by where we don't practice something along the lines of making a tough catch, right? Or, we would practice back shoulders every day,
right?
Every single day. We would practice having to flip your hips to the football every single day. Every single day we would do something about getting off a press coverage. We do a different aspect of it. And those are things that you have to do. And if Chancey Stuckey does that, no matter what Tommy Rees tells him, that's going to be a positive. But you've got to give him the authority to say, look, just these kids need to know how to play the game. That's your job. How do you want me to do that, coach? I don't. That's why we hired you, right? Like, They need to be fundamentally sound receivers from snap to whistle.
Sure, I love that answer.
That's why
we hired you.
Right.
That's great.
So,
okay. So, but thanks for the super chat, Ed. Really appreciate that. You want to go back up?
We had 2 other super chats. Yeah.
Yes, we did.
One was just a sticker.
Yep.
From Shiver Me Fingers.
You found it. We both hit it. There we go. I love that name, by the way. And then he's got another one as well. He says, and thank you very much. I just want to say it. Shiver Me Fingers. I love that name. Thank you. Been listening since the pods with Lou. He's an OG. All right. IB, best analysis out there. Thanks for keeping me entertained. Many late nights while rocking my 2 daughters. Dude.
You know my first thought of that, though, is, right? He's going to have daughters and grow up as being sports freaks because he's like sitting there rocking them and they're listening to us talk football. Like his daughter's going to be like 5 and yelling at the screen. What kind of press release technique is that? That's terrible, right? Whoa, come on. You got to snap off that top end. That's going to be so awesome. I can't wait for like 5 years when you come back and tell us that your daughters are like just like insane football people now. And you don't know why. It's because you're rocking them to sleep every night with us talking football.
That's hilarious.
So I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That totally made my day.
And he said daughters, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's twins. Yeah, and I can appreciate that because I have twin daughters.
You have twins,
and I did this a lot of that. So I'm with you.
Unfortunately, Vince didn't have my podcast on when he was rocking his daughter sleep. So they're not really football people. So.
No, they're not.
He dropped the ball on that. That's bad parenting 101.
I'm like 1 out of 5 on that one, and that's not good. But you know, whatever, 20%. All right, but thank you, Shiver Me Fingers. Really appreciate the super chat. Brian, let's dive into what the depth chart is going to actually look like. And earlier you said the 2 freshmen. Obviously, you mean the guys that are freshmen right now that are going to be rising sophomores. Right. It confused somebody, so I wanted to make sure I brought that up. But the 2 freshmen that played this year obviously will be available in spring, and then you add in Jaden Thomas as well. So there's 3, and then Matt Salerno is 4. I think is that it, or is there one more that I'm – oh, and Braden Lindsey.
Right.
Braden Lindsey will be available in the spring. The injuries, to Joe Wilkins and Avery Davis, those are still up in the air as to when those 2 will be back. So that is kind of
Joe is the only one that I would wonder if he's going to be able to.
You think he might be able
to some degree during the spring?
Gotcha.
Like I don't see him being like part of a bunch of team stuff, but
maybe some drill.
He got hurt early enough.
Okay.
I mean, he got hurt the first Saturday of October,
and it was an ACL, right?
It was an ACL.
Okay.
And it's what now, like a 6 to 8 month thing now?
Yeah, that'd be about 5 months at the beginning of March. So
I mean, really, if he had the surgery immediately, it's like, because like first week of October, I mean, November, December, January, February, March, beginning of April, you're at 6 months. So like there might be some drill work he can start getting into.
Maybe not lateral.
I don't think he's going to be out there with like 7-on-7 or maybe team stuff, but at least he can. And the reason that's important is because I think Joe brings a lot of leadership to the table. I think Joe can be a more productive player than he's been. Joe's not a super athlete.
Right.
And so he is one of those guys that really needs to be fundamentally sound. That's why he's someone that I think could really become a more productive player with the right position coach. And so I would like to see him get some work in with Chancey Stuckey in the spring.
Yeah.
But, we'll find out if that's the case. But, look, you're not going to have Avery Davis and Joe Wilkins as full-time contributors. I don't think you'll have Avery Davis at all. I mean, he got hurt in November.
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't expect to even see him doing anything except maybe.
Like
he'll be off to me, he'll probably be spending time with the trainers during spring practice. Although that's the interesting thing is normally when guys are hurt, they have them over with the trainers during that.
Right.
I would actually like to see them have Avery around the receivers, I think they need
listen and hear.
He's a team captain,
absolutely.
and he's a. Now I don't care about him listening and hearing. They need a leader out there. They need a player leader out there.
That's why it was so important that him and Braden came back, and Joe Wilkins came
back. I don't know how much leadership Braden Lindsey provides. I don't know. I'm not saying he doesn't. I just doesn't strike me as like a, that guy right now. Maybe Braden can start leading by example. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But, you're not going to have them. So that's the negative, right? Here's the positive, however. Because your numbers are so limited and you don't have the veterans out there, your 2 of your 3 most experienced guys are really not going to be out there. You're going to have 5 scholarship receivers. That's a lot of individual work.
It's a lot of reps
that Chancey Stuckey is going to be able to have with Deion Colzie, Jaden Thomas, and Lorenzo Styles, and Braden Lindsey.
Yeah.
And to me, that could be, and this is why I wanted to emphasize so much the importance of emphasizing developing all-around receivers and teaching them how to do all of it at a high level.
Sure.
And if he can focus on that, that's a lot of reps. Now, of course, the concern is you've got to make sure you're not overdoing it because there's a small number of guys. But my focus is more on there's going to be a lot of individual attention he can put on Deion Colzie and Lorenzo Styles, and especially Deion Colzie, because Deion's, as we've mentioned before, Deion's a year younger than most kids in his grade.
Right.
About a year younger. He's still very young. He was not coached overly well in high school because, in fairness to his high school coaches, he was so much better than the guys he was going against.
Right.
That it's kind of like, it's like that expression, you don't know what you don't know till you
don't know it.
Right.
Right.
Until you're put in a situation where it's clear you don't know it. Right.
Right.
And, when you think, and I've said this before too, you may think you're a hard worker because you're just so successful. You think you're working hard, you're tiring yourself, but you're just so much better than everybody else. You think you've maxed your potential. And then you get to college and you realize, like, there's a lot of dudes out here, right? Like, I thought I was working hard, but and Deion's one of those guys that there's another level he can take his work ethic that he learned, that he's going to learn now, hopefully. And if he can embrace that and embrace the need to be fundamentally sound, I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. And I think he's got a chance to be that sophomore surge guy that we're going to write about later, that we've seen a lot at Notre Dame. We saw Golden Tate and Will Fuller went from 6 catches as freshmen to 1,000 yards as sophomores. Equinemius St. Brown went from 1 catch as a freshman to almost, like, he was at like 961 as a sophomore, and he would have been over 1,000, but they didn't have a bowl game that year because it was 2016. He would have gone over 1,000. We've seen Miles Boykin go from almost nothing for 3 years to, 50 catches and 800 yards. So we've seen guys kind of come out of nowhere. And Deion, I would argue, has as much talent as a lot of those guys. Yeah. Potential-wise anyway. And so he could, look, Kevin Austin leaving was bad maybe for the entire group, but there's one guy that benefits a lot, and that's Deion Colzie.
No question. I think this is a super important offseason for him because of exactly what you just said. Because right now, going out of the season, he was second on the depth chart at that position. So just by default, now he's number 1 on the depth chart. By default, I'm not saying that that's how it's be,
Joe Wilkins won't be there
exactly
in the spring to take those reps away.
He's going to get so many reps, and he is going to get. I mean, he's almost. These guys are almost going to have like a one-on-one relationship with Coach Stuckey. I mean,
right now, people talk about like class size and the rooms, right? Like that's true of football too.
Yeah.
If you can somehow condense, like every coach in America would love to be able to have, like, in my opinion, at least they should, maybe they should, to have a situation where you can break up your practices. Right. Like Mount Union does this at the D3 level. They have like their one practice and then they have like a freshman team practice. Okay. They have like 300 players on the roster.
Yeah.
And a lot of D3 teams will have huge rosters because
just load them up
at these. Well, it's that, but also number one, that's where a lot of the school's money comes from. That's where a lot of your male enrollment comes from at these smaller schools.
Yeah, right. They have to hit it.
And so it's like, you want money for your program, make sure your roster has at least 250 kids on it, right? Because you start adding 250 times whatever, tuition is.
Yeah, right.
And that's a lot of money flowing into your program. We can't coach 250 kids at once.
No.
So they would kind of break it up. I don't know if they're still doing that. This is what they did back when I was coaching. Well, that'd be like a dream. Like have my veterans at one practice and then and this would be like early in camp. By the time you get to the season, you've had enough guys leaving and you've got
because
you actually would have like JV coaches basically at Mount Union.
Yeah. You coach veterans differently than you coach, rookies.
Right. So like you want to give young guys that one-on-one attention. Well, they're going to be able to do that this spring. And so Deion Colzie is a guy that him and Jaden Thomas are 2 guys that I think could have big jumps as sophomores as far as being part of that rotation, and they're going to get a ton of individual attention. If Chancey Stuckey puts an emphasis on teaching them how to – I'm talking like from their stance to their start to their stem to their top ends to manipulating DBs on their top ends and their footwork on top ends teaching them how to stack receivers, teaching them how to properly play the football. I mean, how many times have we complained about how when the ball was in the air, they would just kind of jump and drift? You have to practice not drifting. You're going to drift, right? Like it's not
gravity.
Possible for a guy to be running full speed jump straight up in the air tonight, but if you focus on getting them to think that they're trying to do that, then when they drift, they're going to be less drifty.
Yeah.
And they're either going to be able to make the catch or the DB is going to run right through them and you're getting a PI, right? Like there was that call against Virginia where everybody's like, oh, Braden should have got that flag, but he drifted so much, he didn't really invite as much contact as he should have. If he would have been, but you have to teach that. That's not a normal thing. Like another thing that I would, the one phrase that I probably yelled more than any other during my coaching career, it's in the top 5 for sure, it was accelerate through the look back. Because it is a natural tendency when players look back to the ball, they slow down.
Yep.
Because you don't walk into a room with your eyes closed 100 miles an hour because you don't know where the heck you're going.
Well, and
that's once why you turn your back, you don't know where you're going.
And that's why in a relay race and track and field, those guys don't turn around.
Right.
They put their hand back there, and that's why you practice that.
Right. And so it's a technical thing where you've got to condition them to think I'm accelerating through the look back. Now they don't actually accelerate through the look back. But what you do is when you condition them to think that they've got to do that, it helps them maintain their speed when they look back for the football.
Exactly.
And so like little things like that have to be part of what he does every day. And if he does that, I don't think anybody benefits more than Deion Colzie from that. He's a guy that to me could be that where did he come from type of, not for Notre Dame fans, because I think Notre Dame fans, especially Irish Breakdown fans, they know how good Deion can be. It's more about nationally looking at that, right? Like, wow, where'd this guy come from?
Right, man, because nobody knows who he is outside of Notre Dame fan.
Right.
Because he
recruit nicks, like, you know what I mean? But like, we're talking like people that cover the game and normal fans, like, man, where'd this kid come from?
Right, because he was Kevin Austin's backup. I mean, he was, right?
What did he catch, like 4 passes last year?
Yeah, it's something minuscule like that. He had a couple drops, and so he had a couple forgettable moments. Right. And so,
which freshmen do
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's going to be, he has the biggest opportunity to take, I think, the biggest leap from where he's at now to where he could be when the fall starts.
Right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So excited about him.
And Lorenzo is, already kind of showed that. Now it's about with him, it's just kind of just building on what he showed as a freshman.
Yes,
he arrived pretty fundamentally sound. I don't know if it was his dad getting him a receivers coach. I don't know if his high school coaches were teaching him this or if he just took it on himself. But he showed up at Notre Dame, one of their better route runners, right? And now it's about building on that. But with him, it's about getting stronger and just getting the mental experience of it.
Sure.
He's a guy that has a chance to be really good, and you can use him inside and outside.
And I think that's key too, especially this spring when they're low on they're going to be low on numbers all around. But I think because, and I'm of course this is me assuming Avery Davis comes back fully healthy, he's an inside guy, and so I would love to see Lorenzo and Avery on the field at the same time, and so having that ability to put Avery on the to put Styles on the outside, that only benefits you.
Right, but also being able to have him in the slot to because I don't know if Avery Davis is going to come off. I mean, he tore, I believe, ACL and MCL.
I think that's accurate.
He's not going to me, in my opinion, be a 60. He's not going to be able to play the volume in 20, at least early. So there's got to be some ways where it's not just, well, when we want to get Avery off the field, we put a second tight end in the game. That's my big fear, that they're going to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
You need to be able to get Lorenzo inside with Tobias and Braden outside and those type of things. So to me, Lorenzo is going to play all over for me.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
And I think he's a really smart player.
Yep.
So I think he can handle that volume. I do. It's just about designing it in ways to get him moved around in those areas. So the 2 rising sophomores that we know about are guys that are really going to be an important piece to this. Jaden Thomas is a guy that I've heard some things about. Jaden Thomas is a really intriguing player. I liked him as a junior. I gave him a 4-star grade. And then after that, he kind of just fell out a little bit because he had a turf toe injury, I think, is like late in his junior year, and it bothered him as a senior, and he didn't develop as a senior. He just wasn't – he didn't have that same burst. And then he was banged up at the beginning of this year. Well, I talked to a couple people that were around the team late in the year, and they said, boy, this Jayden Thomas kid makes a lot of plays. No, then, of course, they didn't play him in the bowl game. I had somebody say, Jayden Thomas is going to play in the bowl game. He's going to make some plays. And I was like, that'd be nice when he doesn't play snap. But that's just, again, you've got to have a receivers coach. Look, Tommy Reese can't be sitting there thinking about during the game, like, have we gotten so-and-so in the game yet?
Right. That's
got to be the receivers coach's job. You determine who's going to play before the game, and then it's up to the receivers coach to make sure that you're getting that done.
Right.
And that's going to be some chance he's going to have to really work on. But I've heard a lot about Jayden Thomas. And he's a bigger bodied kid, 6'1", over 200 pounds. He can play W, he can play X. Those are the two outside positions. He's another guy that's going to benefit a great deal from there not being a lot of guys out there this spring. So in some ways that's bad, but in some other ways I think that's really good. And the other guy that we're going to talk about is Braden Lindsey. This could be great for Braden Lindsey if he can stay healthy. Like, what I don't want to see is Braden Lindsey checking out a lot during the spring. He's got a hamstring and a quad and all this other kind of stuff. Like, if he can stay out there this spring, Chancey Stuckey needs to be made aware of Braden Lindsey's soft tissue problems and make sure, hey, look, we don't need to kill Braden.
It's a pitch count.
Right. But here's where Braden, I don't care if Braden gets a ton of team reps or – I want to give him some 7-on-7 reps, but, you can limit his team reps. But, man, you got to be all over him during individual. Because if Braden Lindsey learns how to play the game, and he does not know how to play the game right now. He doesn't know how to get off the press. He doesn't know how to handle, stacking. He doesn't know how to play receiver. He's never been taught that, which is kind of beyond a fireable offense for me, but, that's now happened. If Chancey Stuckey can teach Braden some of the finer points of the position, that's where his breakout comes. Because, we just see him. He's just like, I'm just going to run around this guy. Well, You're not that fast. Like, you're fast, but Rocket could just run around guys and still get vertical. Will Fuller could do that.
Sure.
You're more of a low 4.4 guy as opposed to a low 4.3 guy, right? Like, you're not Will Fuller fast. You can't just do that. You have to know how to play the game. And they've got to scheme you to get in space.
Right.
They haven't done a good job of scheming him to get in space since 2019. They've got to fix that. But beyond that, he has to justify more opportunities. That justification comes from him knowing how to play the game. For a guy that's as fast as he is, he gets almost no separation. That's not a speed problem. That's you don't know how to play the game problem.
Right.
You ever watch the NFL Combine on NFL Network?
Sometimes.
And they'll do like that when they're doing the 40s, they'll do like that hologram thing of all the players running the 40s. And you'll see a guy that's like a 4.9 and a guy that's like a 4.6. And the difference between those two is like a couple of feet. That's 0.3 of a second. The difference between a 4.42 and Braden Lindsey, who's around there, and a guy that's, let's say, a 4.52 is like that. That's it. And that's if you just get a clean sprint for 40 yards, right? Like where slower corners can overcome not being fast is by being physical. Braden Lindsey doesn't know how to handle physical receivers because he's not a real big kid. That's why it's so important for a kid like him to learn technique. If Chancey Stuckey can teach Braden how to line up, how to get off a stance, how to use your speed properly, Braden's going to be a big-time playmaker for Notre Dame. Now, the volume won't be there. He's not going to catch 70 balls like Will Fuller did, but he doesn't need to. Braden Lindsey can change the game with 3 touches. He can.
Oh, absolutely.
He can change a game with 3 touches.
Yep.
And sometimes he can change it with 2. The USC game, he changed it with 1 in 2019.
Yep.
The Boston College game in 2019, he changed it with 1. That was a close game for a minute. He put that game away with that jet sweep that went for 60 yards. That's the thing about a guy like Braden Lindsey is he doesn't have to be a volume
Which
guy.
is why scheme is so important.
Right. You have to scheme it, but it's also why it's important that you don't miss on those opportunities when you do scheme it, because they schemed to try to get him the ball this year. But he'd get rerouted. He'd get jammed. He couldn't stack the guy. And then all of a sudden a slow corner's like making a play and Braden's trying to, but that's not who he is. I don't want Braden Lindsey having to make a bunch of jumping contested catches. That's not who he is.
That's not who he is.
He'll make some. He did a great job on the touchdown catch against Cincinnati on that type of play.
And we saw him do it in practice in some of the videos.
But it's just not what you want him doing a ton of. You want him getting in freaking space and catching the ball on the run.
Yep.
But it's not just about scheming that. You've got to scheme it, but he's got to know how to get open. And Braden was never taught how to get open. So if you can teach him how to play the game, that's a guy that could have a big impact on your offense. And he still doesn't need more than 30 snaps a game. He does.
Right.
Braden Lindsey doesn't need 60 snaps like Kevin Austin to make an impact. He needs like 30 to 40. That's it. He needs like 3 to 4 guaranteed touches a game. That's it. You don't now if the offense kind of works out where he gets more because of some RPOs and some things like that, and that's fine. But what I'm talking about is the game plan going in.
Right.
Your game plan going in has to say, this is how we're going to get Chris Tyree at least 10 touches, and this is how we're going to get Braden Lindsey at least 4 touches, at least 3 to 4 touches. Beyond that, it's about just the overall way you're doing.
Right. Take
Michael Mayer's going to get his because of the way you build your offense. But like I'm talking plays where this is specifically we are going to get him the ball this way. If you don't have at least 2 or 3 pass game things where the design of the play is to get Chris Tyree the ball, then you're not doing it right. If your game plan doesn't include at least 2 or 3 things where it's designed jet sweep, reverse, tunnel screen, and you should have a reverse, a jet sweep, a screen, and a deep shot for Braden Lindsey every single game. At some point, you're running at least one of those things to him every single game. Because here's the thing. If you have some success with it, teams are going to do things to take that away.
Exactly.
If they see Braden Braden Lindsey hits a couple big, look screens, now screens, just the one where you throw him behind the line or a bubble screen, he catches it, creases it, and turns it into a 50-yard gain or hits a home run. Next time that you try to do that the next week, those teams are going to be prepared for that. They're going to come flying up when they see that pump to Braden Lindsey. Next thing you know, you're pumping and you're throwing it over top to Michael Mayer for a touchdown.
You got it.
Right? Or you're throwing it over top to Styles or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
Those are the kind of things that you need to see, but you've got to teach Braden how to be better at that with how to play the game. He's not so dynamic that he can just Will Fuller you. Like Will Fuller he didn't need technique. And Will had decent technique. Mike Denbrock and Ryan Mahaffey did a good job teaching him good fundamentals. This has been more of a Del Alexander problem more than anything.
Sure.
And so if Chancey Stuckey takes pride in teaching the technique of the position, which former receivers tend to do that.
Right.
Which is kind of one of my bits of excitement is like guys that play the game, especially guys that weren't elite athletes, and Chancey was not an elite athlete.
Because you have to be good at what you're doing in order to stay relevant.
Chancey Stuckey doesn't play in the NFL for 4 years because of his God-given ability. He had to know how to play the game.
Exactly. Right.
And so that's something I'm optimistic by because Braden Lindsey, and we've been saying this for how many years? Man, and honestly, if we hadn't seen the 2019 success, I wouldn't even be talking about Braden Lindsey right now. I'd be like, this guy's just a track guy. He's not. But we have seen him be a difference maker on the football field when used properly.
Right, scoring in different ways.
Right. Yep. 2019, he scored on a look screen. He scored on a post route. He scored on a jet sweep, and he scored on a reverse.
Yeah. Tom, when you want to talk about changing the game, it only takes one of those to change a game. So that's what you want. That's what you want for sure. So that is who is going to be on the depth chart that we know about, that has been here, has gone through school for at least a semester up to this point. But there is one guy, at least at this point, that is coming in, and he will be new. That's Tobias Merriweather. He is the only freshman signee so far in the 22 class. And there are some questions, that I've starred over in the chat, Brian, that we can get to later about potential for future guys. But right now, what we do know is Tobias Merriweather is going to be on campus in the fall. Now, I will say that I really wish that he was on campus in the spring, especially with the numbers at wide receiver. And somebody and I can't remember who it was in the chat, put it all in caps, and it felt like I was being yelled at. But he was saying
that was Robert Robinson, right?
Yeah, it was.
That's my guy. Yep.
Yeah. You're saying, he needs to get on the field and blah, blah, blah. I'm not in any way debating that, but as a regular enrollee, it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
No, it'll be more difficult, but it'll be more difficult.
Okay.
But there's no excuse not to get him ready.
I agree with that. I
right?
absolutely agree with that. I would be more on board though if he was an early enrollee and be like, yeah, let's go. He's part of what's happening. Let's roll. I just think it might take a little bit longer, but yes, it's absolutely Chancey Stuckey's job to get a true freshman rolling and get him ready to go and ready to play. No question about it.
Right. And he's a guy, to me, he is too good not to play. He is too good not to be a part of what they're doing. I don't want to spend a ton of time on Tobias just yet because he's not like right now. I want to kind of focus on the spring first.
Yeah, exactly.
But Tobias is the guy that's got to play.
Yeah.
Barring injury, he's got to play. He's too good not to play. And the thing about Tobias is if you watch his high school film, Tobias already knows some of the stuff that the Notre Dame receivers never learned by the time they were seniors. I mean,
I just hope he doesn't forget it.
Well, it's not going to be a problem now because the guy that would have made him forget it is gone. But like I'm watching him stack. I mean, I remember I tweeted at one point in time during the season where I was like, man, I wish the Notre Dame receivers, like current receivers, knew how to do this. And, that is something that to me was like, man, like this kid's going to come in ready to play. He's got the weight room must be a big part for him. Like that's physically strong, but that determines your volume, not your ability to play. And to me,
makes sense.
There can't be excuses about, well, he's this, he's that, he's young. Bull. That kid's too good not to play. And here's the thing. If you want to start recruiting top receivers, you can't recruit a top 100 guy. SI All-American has him as a top 50 guy. You can't recruit those kind of guys and then not play him as freshmen.
Right.
Good luck convincing Carnell Tate he's going to come in as a freshman.
Right.
So you got to get him ready to play. But that's a down the road priority for Chancey Stuckey, and that's kind of partly why yes, I would rather him be on campus now.
Sure.
But there's some advantages to that because now you can spend even more time with Deion Colsey, Jaden Thomas, and Lorenzo Styles.
Sure.
Get them really up and running to where now they can kind of lead Tobias when he shows up.
And
but also now you can spend more time with Tobias.
Right. When you're only adding one to the group. I mean, that's not that big of a difference from spring to fall when you're only adding one guy, especially one guy that's as advanced as he is already.
Right. Technically, he's got to. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm talking technically because Chancey Stuckey can't do anything about him physically. I mean, that's Matt Bayless.
That's why Matt Bayless makes his money. But you can't, from July to August, the guy's not going to gain 15 pounds of good weight and look like Michael Floyd. Right. You're just going to have to teach him technically, okay, you're a skinny guy. You're not real strong. We got to make sure you're really good with your hands and feet to be able to get off because teams are going to want to press you. Right. And here's how you beat that. And then just find those niches for him. And he can play boundary. He can play field. He can do anything. I mean, he's a really versatile player.
Well, in the limited film that I've watched of Baylor, they didn't have any big, huge, imposing physical wide.
Yeah, like Tyquan Thornton was like 6'3", 195.
Yeah.
Like, that's not like Michael Floyd was like 6'3", 220.
Right, exactly. So,
he looked more like Kevin Austin. I mean, that's what Tyquan Thornton looked like. He looked like a skinnier Kevin Austin.
There you go.
And that was their big guy. Right?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Chancey Stuckey's at least used to working with guys that technique is going to be the important thing because you're not going to be able to out-muscle everybody out there, right? So that leads.
And he didn't have any 4-2 guys.
Right.
Things like that. And the nice thing is he was around some big, tall, skinny receivers at Clemson for a couple years.
True.
T. Higgins and Justin Ross and a lot of those guys. So at least he was around it. I don't know how much he was on the field on a day-to-day basis. Sure. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that'll help. And then look, they got to get more bodies. And I still believe if it was up to me, I would go to Xavier Watts. If I'm Tommy Rees, if I'm Tommy Rees and Chancey Stuckey, I'm going to Coach Freeman's office. I'm saying, hey, listen, I know Xavier Watts is going to be real hesitant to come play offense, but we got to play that kid. And here's the thing. The only way you're going to convince Xavier Watts to go back to offense, which I would do, this is my opinion, which is what I would do, right? I'm not giving you intel that I know he's really going to switch, but I'm going to act like I don't know if he's going to switch or not. I know that he's been given the option that it's going to be up to him. That's all I know. It's up to you. And he's been told by the defensive coaches, we want you. We think you can be a stud here. He's been told by the offensive coaches, we want you. We think you can help us. If they want to get him to offense, it's real simple. Xavier, you're going to play.
Yeah.
You're going to get the ball. And it's got to be a guarantee because if you're him, I don't trust you because you told me I was going to get a chance last year and I didn't get a chance. You told me I was going to get a chance as a freshman and I didn't get a chance. And so I don't really trust the offensive coaches. And yeah, I mean, Kelly and Dell are gone, but the leader of the offense is still the same guy. So if Tommy Rees wants to convince Xavier Watts to come over there, and they need to, because he can do things that none of the other receivers can do outside of maybe Braden Lindsey. But the difference is Xavier's a lot stronger than Braden Lindsey.
Yep.
Lorenzo Styles can do some of those things, but he's more of a vertical guy to me. Xavier Watts is the kind of guy that you can just throw a screen to, a slant to, and he's going to start making people miss. And
he doesn't
Braden
go
Lindsey
down
does it with speed.
Yeah, he doesn't go down when he gets thrown on.
Xavier's fast, but Xavier's also like he's got some strength. He's got some make you miss to him.
Absolutely.
And they don't have that on the roster. You've got to guarantee him playing time, and I'm fine doing that. That if that's what it takes to get him back to offense, and then you've got to follow through and play him because Xavier Watts could help you.
Yes,
and then, JoJo Johnson's a guy that I would look into moving to. But the problem there is he's also coming off of a knee injury, so I don't know how much that helps you. But you put Xavier Watts in the mix, and again, it's a small number of receivers. You're going to get a lot of individual time with Xavier to get him back on track as a receiver. It's another one of the benefits of being low on numbers. So I would rather have them than any grad transfer, any undergrad transfer, any high school kid that's currently a legitimate target. I would take Xavier Watts over any of those guys at this point in time because he's older, he's a more dynamic athlete, and I've always felt that he could be a really, really good football player. That's just kind of where I'm at. I think he can be a really good wide receiver. And then he eliminates, because he's technically going to be a redshirt sophomore. I mean, a redshirt. Let me think here. No, he'll be a
sophomore.
He'll be a redshirt sophomore next year and still have 3 years of eligibility remaining.
Right.
Because, he got the red shirt in the COVID year. So, I mean, he's still got a lot of time left. He doesn't just help your present, he can help your future. And I start thinking of a future of receiver that has like Lorenzo Styles and Xavier Watts, Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey for at least 2 years together each with Jaden Thomas. And and then whoever you get in the 2023 class, So, yeah. So we're going to get to some questions, Vince. I know you got to get out of here soon, but we've got some questions we're going to get to. But I did want to Donald Bolin said today's my birthday. Would love as a gift an opening day win.
Well,
I'm with you on that.
We'd like that too. There's going to be a lot of birthdays between
now and then. We'll do what we can, Donald. We'll do what we can.
But I do want to wish you morally.
I do want to wish you a happy birthday, Donald.
Yes, happy
and I
birthday.
appreciate you stepping in. So Vince is going to step out.
Yes.
And I'm going to step in.
I did start a bunch of stuff over there, so hopefully that helps you out a little bit.
Yeah. And Joe Aribe says, if I were Reese, I'd study how Kyle Shanahan uses Deebo Samuel and utilize some of those tactics to get Braden Lindsey the ball. I would argue that is accurate. I would agree with you on that. But I would also say I think the better comp for Deebo is actually Xavier Watts. I think that because he's strong, like Deebo's strong. Braden Lindsey's not real strong. I think that's an area where I think you could see Xavier Watts really be impactful in that regards for me. So I'm going to get through some questions. We have some super chats, some questions that I want to get to. Scott Miller says, Brian, you dropped some subtle hints about Notre Dame adding a receiver before signing day. Was you thinking it would be low, or is there still someone out there? I'm not sure what hints that I dropped, Scott. I didn't mean to drop hints. So if something I said came across as me dropping hints, I apologize. I know they wouldn't like to add another receiver, but I don't know who that's going to be. And I don't know if they're going to accomplish that. So if that is what Vince was referring to, my comment of saying the two freshmen, I was referring because technically Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey are both still freshmen. Lorenzo is actually going in his third semester, but Deion's still a freshman. And they're rising sophomore. So that's what I was referring to by then. Toe Jam says, shouldn't the OC be focused on making sure the position groups work well together, game planning and watching film and not fundamentals? No, that should not be his only concern. The OC has to be involved in everything. He has to say, this is what we're going to do. It's up to you to make sure you get this done. And fundamentals have to be part of that. He has to make sure that his coaches understand the importance of making sure your players are fundamentally sound. It has to be a part of what he does. And it's up to the position coaches to execute getting that done, but it has to come with the directive of the offensive coordinator. And part of working well together is being fundamentally sound. Notre Dame has been awful for years at running mesh concepts. The timing, like the last 2-3 years, 3-4 years, it's been terrible because none of them really know how to properly do that when it's off, when it's not just everything's perfect, right? They're dropping zone and things like that. The spacing that they have when they're running routes is, I mean, there's times where you'll see 3 receivers like kind of horizontally, all within like 7-8 yards of each other. That's not supposed to be the case, and it makes it easier for 1 or 2 guys to kind of cover all of them. That's where, because your fundamentals stink, it impacts your scheme. That's part of playing together. You have to demand that your position coaches teach guys how to play the game. Lance Taylor was a great technical football coach. His guy, and that's why you saw his guys be able to do the whole enchilada. But that's who Lance was. That Lance had that kind of personality of, look, I care about teaching these guys how to play the game. It wasn't necessarily a directive from the offensive coaching staff. Chancey Stuckey has to be that kind of guy himself, even if Tommy Rees doesn't demand it. But Tommy Rees needs to demand it. Hey, look, we're going to have great scheme. We're going to have all that. But from now until, I don't know, whenever you start Ohio State prep, which will be like 2 weeks before the first game, from now until then, our focus is on teaching these kids how to play the game physically. Like they need to be tough, they need to be physical, they need to be disciplined, and they need to be fundamentally sound. That is so much more important than whatever X's and O's and schemes you think you need to come up with between now and then. If you teach them how to do that, then once you start implementing your schemes even more in depth in the fall, they're going to be that much better. And that's where his focus needs to be. Sam Tyrell says, Brian, do you think the staff could end up moving Chris Tyree to slot? This would help the numbers and provide instant home run threat to the receiver room. No, that would not work. You can do things with Tyree out at receiver, but not full time. Number one, if you move Chris Tyree, you have 3 running backs in your depth chart. That's not enough. Now you've created a problem at running back. And I don't think Chris is a natural receiver. Chris can do things as a receiver, but he's not a natural receiver. He's a running back. Take advantage of him as a running back in the pass game, which they did in the bowl game, but he's not a natural receiver. He catches the ball well for a running back. He would not be catching the ball well for a receiver, in my opinion. We do got a few super chats here. I'm going to get to the one from Paul last. John Faulkner, thank you, John, for this. Thank you both for all of your hard work and amazing insight. Listening to Irish Breakdown is one of the favorite parts of my day. What is a good former Notre Dame receiver comparison for Styles, Tobias, and Colsey? That's a good question. So for Styles, I would say, part of me wants to say Will Fuller, but just not as fast. But I think their body types are similar, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best one I would use. But of like the last 20 years, I'd say Will Fuller's probably the closest in style of play. Obviously, Will was faster. I think Lorenzo's taller and stronger than Will was. But as far as how they're used, more vertical guys, get them running, get them things like that, I think they're similar. I think for Colsey, I mean, to me, that's an easier one. I mean, Miles Boykin, I think Dion is more talented than Miles was, but their skill set and how you use them is similar. Tobias, to me, is who'd be a better one for Colsey is Mo Stovall. I think Mo Stovall to me would be a better comparison because Mo was a little skinnier earlier in his career. I think Dion's a faster version of Mo Stovall. That's who I think Dion Colsey can be. And then Tobias, I'm going to stick with that era. Tobias, to me, is a faster, skinnier version of Jeff Samardzija. Like style of play. Like he can stretch the field. He can do things after the catch. I think he could be a better route runner than Jeff was. But that'd probably be as far as for Notre Dame, that'd probably be the closest comparison. They haven't had a lot of guys like Tobias Merriweather. They haven't. And that's kind of what makes him a little bit unique. Anthony Shea with a super chat. I haven't seen Tyler Buckner reach out to anyone on Twitter. Carnell may like that along with anyone else. Drake is leading the charge. Tyler Buchner has to be a leader. I think he's the guy. Worried on whether he has the intangibles. Anthony, I appreciate the super chat very, very much. Tyler was involved in recruiting guys. He's not a go out and convince guys to come kind of guy. I think he has some leadership qualities to him. I've never heard anyone question his leadership. He's not the outgoing personality that Drew Pine is, but he's got leadership quality. But what Tyler does, from what I understand, is Tyler reaches out to people, but it's privately. It's DMs, it's text messages, phone calls. It's that way. That's way more impactful than sending some tweet out publicly. Those things are normally more for everyone else to see rather than being impactful for the player that you're trying to reach out to. If you want to reach out to a player and have an impact in recruiting him to Notre Dame, it's going to be through DMs. It's going to be through text messages. It's going to be through phone calls. It's going to be through actual interaction with that player and developing a relationship. Tyler Buchner just saying, hey, come play with me in a tweet doesn't move the needle at all. Tyler Buchner developing a relationship with Carnell Tate and saying, hey, look, man, here's why I did what I did as a freshman. That's the role they had me doing. But trust me, you come here, I'm going to get you the ball. I can get you the ball. That comes through relationship, not a random tweet where you can have no more than 280 characters or whatever it is, right? So to me, just because we're not seeing him show everyone what he's doing doesn't mean he's not doing it, because I have heard that he has been involved. Drew Pine's involved in a lot of these things too. And Drew was a highly ranked recruit as well. So that matters too. But both of those kids, from what I'm told, are involved in recruiting other players. It's just not in an outward, hey, everyone, look at me kind of way, which a lot of times is what those tweets tend to be. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, and people kind of understand like where I'm coming from on that and what their role is. Got a couple more here that we're going to get to. We have a super chat. We have a super. I want to kind of hold off on the end on Paul's super chat because it's so much different than what kind of we've talked about so far. Just want to get to some of these things. Jay Montalbano, Brian, are you hearing things that make you question Tommy Rees's OC ability? It's not that I question his ability. I think Tommy Rees has the tools to be an elite coach. I do. I think Tommy Rees is a really smart guy. The issue, however, is he's still just 29 years old. He still has only been a college football coach for like 6 years. There's a lot of things that you have to have taught to you. And part of the reason that I'm a big believer in fundamentals is because I was taught very early on as a coach by guys I worked with, by spending time around Urban Meyer's staff at Bowling Green, by sitting down with Al Groh and his staff at Virginia when we were having sort of, collaborations when I was a coach, and talking to Anthony Poindexter and Mike Groh and guys like that. And just, you spend time around coaches and you just learn that it has to be instilled in you, because young people, like for me, when I was young, when I got into coaching, I was scheme. Let me show everyone how smart I am. Then the good veteran coaches sit me down and say, look, that's all fine and dandy, but if your kids don't know how to play, that scheme stuff's not going to matter when we play anybody good. And to me, I feel that's something that's hurt Tommy Rees, because he was under a head coach that didn't really seem to care as much about that kind of stuff. And Tommy Rees needs people around him, Marcus Freeman, John McNulty, hopefully Harry Heastand, that can sit him down and say, hey, man, you are a wicked smart dude, but you've got to make sure that first and foremost, before anything else, you are setting and creating an environment from a coaching standpoint where there's an imperative on teaching guys how to play the game the right way. And that will lead to your schemes being phenomenal. And then you can be the next Steve Sarkis, the next Lane Kiffin, because you are a really smart guy. But you need to have a greater holistic outlook on how to prepare. The issue that I have is I think Tommy Rees focuses a lot on studying the NFL and Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur and the really smart NFL guys. And that's fine scheme-wise, but he's got to understand that the great college teams, Bama, Ohio State, their offenses are also well coached fundamentally. And if he can incorporate those two things, then I have no doubt in his ability. The ability is there, Jay. I love the ability. It's about the experience. That will he be able to emphasize and focus on those right things? And it's not saying that he won't do it, or it's more about it. Just, I don't know if it was necessarily a point of emphasis this past year. The counter argument that you could make to that is, Well, he didn't. Maybe he knew that. Maybe he knew what I knew, which is Dell and Jeff Quinn are not great fundamental coaches, and so I got to really emphasize the scheme to overcome the lack of good, sound coaching. Maybe he knew that, but my question would be: is then why was he sort of behind the scenes? What I've from sources so unwilling to move on from Dell. At least that's kind of what I've been told by multiple sources. Now, if that's not necessarily true, and he was just kind of having Dell's back as long as Dell is here, which you should do, but at the end of the day, understood that there needed to be a change, then that's an encouraging thing for me. And it tells me that he will get it. But I can only evaluate him on what he's done up to this point. And up to this point, he hasn't shown me that he appreciates the need to be the most fundamentally sound football team on the field. If you're that, the scheme will become even more effective. And that's where you kind of really show all NFL teams what you're capable of, and where you really show other teams, if you're, wanting to be a college head coach, like what you're capable of. Like, hey, look, man, my scheme is phenomenal, but also we know how to play the game. And that's more conducive to, boy, that's the guy you want to be your head coach, as opposed to just, wow, look how smart he is. It's, yeah, he's smart, but can your kids play the game? Look, Clemson plays a fundamentally sound game. Ohio State on offense is a fundamentally sound team. Bama's a pretty fundamentally sound team. Georgia's a very fundamentally sound team. Notre Dame has not been. And that's not a talent thing. Hey, well, my guy's not, a five-star player, so he doesn't know how to, execute top ends. That's nonsense. That is something anyone can do. The elite athletes can do it even better. But Notre Dame's players didn't not have good fundamentals because they lacked the ability to do so. It's they weren't taught those things. And to me, until that changes, that's going to be where it's going to be. Tommy Guns with it, and very good question, Jay. I appreciate you giving me a chance to kind of clarify that. Tommy Guns, Brian, why doesn't Lindsey get more of a look inside in the slot? I think it's a lack of strength, Tommy. An inside guy gets banged around a lot. You've got to have some toughness to you. You've got to have some strength to you. Braden's not a real strong guy. He's a guy that can get knocked around a bit. I do think there could be some value to having him in the slot if he's taught better. The problem is you couldn't put Braden really in the slot in the past, except to kind of run him on jets and reverses and stuff, because he didn't know how to use his hands as a route runner. And if you don't know how to use your hands as a route runner, you're going to get jammed all day. Where surprisingly, Avery Davis was their best route runner the last couple of years. And I don't know where he learned it from or who taught it to him, but he was the only guy that showed any of those things, which leads me to believe that it wasn't coming from Notre Dame. Because otherwise, why didn't anybody else do that? Why wasn't anyone else held to that same standard or those same things? And so to me, if Braden can get taught how to play the game, then I'm more prone to using him in the slot at times. But I think the lack of strength is the thing ultimately that's going to keep him from being a guy that you put there a ton. That's a good question, Tommy. I like that. Zachary Lane asks, Brian, does Chancey Stuckey have a type of he likes at receiver? I know one of Dell's many mistakes was that he only went after tall, ready-made guys. I'm hoping it's the opposite with Chancey. I don't have a clue what kind of guy Chancey Stuckey likes. I mean, he's been a coach for 1 year. I mean, he hasn't even completed a full recruiting cycle. There's guys that that Baylor's still recruiting. I know, like the Caleb Douglas kid that Notre Dame's talking to, and I think they went and visited him last week. He's a guy that was on Baylor's list. He's a 6'4" guy. That's a tall guy, and I mean, I'm pulling up their commitment list, so just give me a second to pull that up. He's a big 6'4" guy. The other receivers they signed a kid named Jordan Neighbors, who's 5'11", 180. They signed Armani Winfield, who is a 4-star recruit, who's 6'2", 185. And as I mentioned, they're going after Caleb Douglas, who's 6'4". So, I mean, that's some diversity right there. That's that's a nice mix of players. And Armani Winfield, they got he was originally committed to Texas. So that's kind of, I can only show you what they've landed. I don't know if I know enough about Coach Stuckey to know if he has a type. Hopefully he doesn't have a type. Guys, I think, look, give me guys that are athletic. Give me guys that can catch the football. Give me guys that have some competitiveness to them. And then I can teach you how to play. And ideally, you're going to have a blend of types. Give me a guy that can make plays after the catch. Give me a guys that can stretch the field. Give me guys that can win one-on-ones. Hopefully his type is diversity of skill. If you have diversity of skill, I think you're going to have a dynamic receiving core, in my opinion. But it's a really good question, Zachary. Eric Fasano asked, it was Lorenzo Styles an early enrollee? Yes. That's why I'd mentioned he was in his third semester, going into his third semester. He was an early enrollee. And he says, as a follow-up on Styles, when was let me see here. When was he ready to play? Word of mouth, as opposed to when BK Dell forced him to play him. I was told that he impressed people during the spring. And I know Vince liked what he saw from him during the spring. But, I mean, look, when a kid just steps on the field and the first chance you really give him to play, he makes a bunch of plays. Usually he was already ready. It's like Logan Diggs just didn't all of a sudden figure out how to play the week of the Virginia Tech game, right? I mean, he knew how to play. Are you going to use him in a way that allows him to play as a freshman? And we didn't always see that from Notre Dame in the past. And so, that's an area where I think hopefully the new coach can fix that. But I mean, look, Lorenzo Styles proved that he was ready to play going back to the spring. I mean, that's some of the people I talked to, like, man, this kid makes a lot of plays. He's fast, he's strong. And that's the thing too, is a lot of people talk about how strong he was. That surprised some people, because he's kind of skinny, but he's really strong. And that impressed some people. So now he was ready to play when he got on campus. Now the volume needs to improve, but he should have played more right away. There's no reason not to play him more early on. Keith Wiegand, hopefully I said that right, Keith. Brian, does X remind you of Tate because of his toughness running after the catch? Yeah, I see some of that. I don't know if I would necessarily go there because their body types are a little bit different. But yeah, I think I like that similarity. I mean, Golden was kind of like, once he got the ball, he was a running back. I mean, he was a kid that had over 2,000 rushing yards in high school. Xavier's more of a receiver when he's got the ball in his hands. But I looking back at past Notre Dame receivers, Keith, I think Golden is a good one from a style of play standpoint. Again, I'm not saying he's going to come out this year and catch 50 balls for 1,000 yards or, win the Biletnikoff in a couple of years or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the style of play wise, which is what I think Keith is talking about, is something that I see. Yeah, I think there's a lot. There's some similarities there. I like that one. I like that one. And I think that is gonna do it for today's show, everybody. So thank you so much for being a part of our show today. Keep our guy Lorenzo or Ladarius Martin in your prayers, him and his family in his prayers. He wasn't with us in the show today. Make sure you're checking out irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for the message boards. We got a lot of great conversation going on right now, a lot of questions. We're starting to put more and more of our recruiting intel and recruiting stuff on the message board now. So we're having even more recruiting stuff going up on that. And a lot's going on. We got the merch store. If you sign up if you want to buy merch and you want to sign up for the message board, then wait till you sign up for the message board before you buy the merch. Because what happens is, if you sign up for a monthly membership, you get a 10% discount for your entire purchase in the merch store. If you sign up for an annual membership, you get a 20% off your entire purchase discount. So you're definitely going to take advantage of that. Check out the Built Bars too. If you like Built Bars, or if you're looking for a protein bar, I'm telling you, they're better than any candy bar that I could eat. And it's the Built Bars. My favorite is the cookie dough. I also like the cherry barcia. The coconut almond is one of my favorites as well. My wife can't have that one because she's allergic to coconuts and almonds. But so I get that one all to myself. But they're phenomenal. And if you use the Irish Breakdown promo code, which there's a link below in the description of the show, you get 10% off your whole purchase. So give those a try if you have not given those a try. I truly love them. That's why we advertise for them. We don't advertise for hardly anything, where it's us directly advertising. Only things that I know and trust and like. And Built Bar, I definitely like. So take advantage of that. But of course, make sure you're ready to be back with us tomorrow. We are going to launch our new platform next week as well. We're still putting some final details of what the recruiting the days are going to be. But now that Ryan and Sean are rocking and rolling, we're gonna alter some things. We're gonna have recruiting shows during the week. Definitely one in the day. We're gonna try to have one at night. But as far as when and how, We're going to work those things out, but we plan on launching part of that next week, and then we plan on having the whole thing ready to rock and roll when we get in here in the first week of February. So very excited about that. I think you all are going to love we're going to mix up. We're going to have some recruiting, have some team. We're going to have all types of fun stuff. We're going to really change things up a lot. But the core of what we do is not going to change. We're going to get here. We're going to talk football. We're going to engage with you. We're going to make this a community thing and have a ton of fun. So be on the lookout for that. Really, really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you all again tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel, ready to talk some more Notre Dame football. Have a great day. Check out the Irish Breakdown message board and website, and thank you for listening to the Irish Breakdown podcast.